todo lo que comemos, hacemos, decimos, va a afectar la parte física, la parte mental, la parte emocional a fuerzas.
Lo sensible me va a mostrar lo que me hace sentir bien. Cuando yo tengo dolor y me abro al dolor, voy a aprender a descubrir lo que sana mi dolor. La medicina está dentro.
Explorar la eroticidad del cuerpo físico sin poner barreras, ¿no? Y abrir una comunicación plena con mi pareja. Mira, tócame de esta manera.
Si crees que algo externo a ti te va a dar esa felicidad, esa plenitud, estamos bien equivocados, caray.
Y este es el podcast de Karina Velasco. Descubre el mundo con otros ojos. Y quiero platicarles un poco de qué trata el método Yourgasmic, que es este entrenamiento que diseñamos precisamente para que tú descubras lo que te prende en la vida, lo que te hace brillar y ser vibrante. Y cuando nos enfocamos en el placer, esa es la puerta para accesar las energías poderosas que son parte importante de quienes somos y las que nos permiten expandir nuestro potencial como ser humano. Y este método, a diferencia de otros, lo que hace es trabajar con esta sabiduría corporal. Esto significa que vamos a acceder a las capas más profundas de nuestro ser para descubrir nuestros regalos, que son nuestro derecho de vida. La energía, el entusiasmo, el placer, el gozo y la expansión. Y usamos diferentes técnicas ancestrales y filosofías como el Tantra y el Tao, y lo que hacemos es refinarlas de una forma moderna para que las podamos utilizar de una forma práctica, rápida, fácil y muy divertida. Lo que más valoramos es a nuestro ser. Y en Yourgasmic lo que queremos es que tú descubras este valor que tienes para brillar, para ser tú, en meditaciones que en 10 minutos puedes tener un entendimiento que va a cambiar tu vida, o en 7 minutos puedes cambiar tu estado del ser. Esta es nuestra magia y te invito a que nos visites en yourgasmic.com. Hola y bienvenidos al podcast, y muchas gracias a todos ustedes por sus emails y pues por pedir tantos temas, y precisamente hoy vamos a hablar acerca de uno de ellos, que son las relaciones abiertas, y quise invitar a Lawrence Lanoff, que ofrece sabiduría que ayuda a la gente a encontrar claridad, y él cuestiona los mitos culturales alrededor del sexo, la espiritualidad y el dinero. Él ayuda a sus estudiantes a desprogramar las prisiones de las normas, creencias y supersticiones. Él es el creador del método Yourgasmic y autor del libro El futuro del sexo, que escribimos juntos, y además ofrece múltiples cursos y meditaciones en línea que puedes encontrar en yourgasmic.com y en lawrencetheenergymaster.com. Él también es el creador de Open Relationship Blueprint, y este podcast es en inglés, así que para que, si están interesados en escuchar y no hablan este idioma, que pues lo escuchen con un amigo y que les cuente de qué trata este tema tan interesante que todos nosotros nos hemos cuestionado, que son las relaciones abiertas. Comenzamos. So I'm really excited to be here with Lawrence. And as you heard in the introduction, we have a long story together. I was coaching with him for 7 years. Learned a lot about sex energy, but today, because you asked for it, we're talking about open relationships, because I think it's a lot of people are questioning themselves about it, about like monogamy still working, why is everybody getting a divorce, like what is happening in relationships that it's shifting. And of course you have your open relationships blueprint that you can find in yourgasmic.com, and you kind of have supported a lot of people to transition in that realm, in that new realm of open relationships. So welcome, my dear Lawrence.
Why, thank you. So good to be here, and so appreciate you taking the time and inviting me here to share all this really a wealth of knowledge.
A wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, like just to open to possibilities and just a deeper inquiry of what's really going on with the relationships, because it also shifted a lot in this pandemic. You know, there was like the sex drought and relationship drought, and we've been kind of feeling lonely and we want to go out to the world and we all have changed, but then you go out to the world and then you notice the same thing is happening. So first of all, like what's your perception? What's happening with relationships at the moment?
Wow. I mean, it's definitely a transition point. There is no question about that. You're going out into the world and things are different. I think people have really started to question what is important, right? Especially, some of us, myself included, done a lot of inner work. If you didn't, you may be doing a lot of processing right now. So I notice people are at two ends of this. They're like vibing or they're doing a lot of processing. And part of that is, the primary relationship is with yourself. That's the primary. And in order to understand relationships in general, it really is, it's beginning to shift a paradigm from the relationship as something out there that is there to complete me or heal me. The what we're seeing with divorce rates and people asking questions, I think there's just a lot more questions about why we do what we do. And I think that's what's potentially exciting right now and a great time for us to be having this discussion.
So you say about the primary relationship is the first relationship. What do you mean by that?
The primary relationship needs to be with you. So think about one of the stories that we're told is that the relationship is out there and you have to find it and that completes you. And of course,
and the struggle is to find it.
The struggle is to find it.
Yeah, once
right?
you find it, everything's perfect. That's
right.
the narrative.
That's right. And what's fascinating about this is it's a very absurd and strange paradigm. Like, you're not okay. You have to seek with all your might and energy to get okay by finding the right person.
Who's going to make everything okay.
Yes. I mean, that's, on the face of it, is just kind of nutty. And yet I was on an airplane the other day and, met this woman who just went on about, I'm looking for, for the one, and everything's the one, not the one, not the one. And it's a very stressful, very, very stressful paradigm. And I think that that's part of what's happening.
Because that's the pressure. So let's say for all the people out there who's single and you go out on dating, you go with this frame of like basically doing a casting to see if that's the one or not. But according to your checklist, that most of it has been, let's say, conditioned by your parents or your primary figure, which is your mother or father, or what you hear and what that is supposed to be.
Yes.
Versus just being yourself.
Well, right. So there is yourself, and yourself would be kind of more who you actually are. And then there's all this stuff piled on top of that. And so most people are thinking this stuff is themselves. And that who they are is something to be ashamed of or afraid of. And that's kind of also one of the paradoxes is, I think one of the reasons why people on the subject of relationship, one of the reasons why it's so stressful, can be so stressful, is we don't know how to connect. We really haven't learned how to connect just emotionally and with words and with our energy. And we also haven't learned how to connect around sex, like really connect. So we're now, if you think of whatever your perfect relationship would be, whatever is in your imagination, and you're like, if you think of all the layers and frameworks and programming and training, traumas, conditioning, belief systems, realities that pile on top of that, we're now 20 or 30 steps away. That's why it's so challenging.
So those 20, 30 steps would be kind of the little obstacles. Like imagine that I'm doing this running track with a lot of obstacles to get to the, to the goal, to the finish line. And I have to jump and figure it out a way to jump through that. Like, how would you describe those obstacles?
Right. So one of the obstacles would be, I'm gonna jump off the cliff here for a moment. One of the obstacles would be the belief that monogamy is the answer to all your problems. Right? That becomes an obstacle because monogamy it's an idea, right? That really works for creating bonds in and building culture. So as an idea, as a concept, you two stay together forever till death do you part. Mm-hmm. Right? So a good framework is a framework that will take you from birth to death. And monogamy, as far as a cultural idea, as a global idea, two people coming together till death do they part, it turns out that creates a very, it has the potential to create a strong social bond, right? And social bonds are how we build networks and groups and people and ultimately villages and cities and towns.
But we can do that in many different ways, like co-creating or as friends. But like as friends, like you and I are friends, we co-create together, we did our book together, we have some fun, we teach around the world, but it's like we don't need a contract. Right. So why is it that you need a contract if you're claiming that you're with the person you love the most and it's the one?
So society has to validate. So the contract is really a validation in society that you guys are agreeing to essentially, go all the way.
Just say it.
Yeah. To go all the way and be healthcare providers for each other. Mm-hmm. Right. Because from the state's perspective, if you can get two people to buy into the system, they will do a majority of the healthcare. Right, they'll take care of each other. They're basically saying like, okay, we're not going to have to worry about this couple because they have a contract. The contract should supersede any fighting that they do. And the belief in monogamy and all of that stuff, that should be the glue. And then if that doesn't do it, then we have guilt and shame and the threat of hell. And between all of those things, you get this spitball of something that will basically take care of passing down stuff, mm-hmm. controlling the bloodline, and making sure that you have a healthcare provider, somebody who will be with you all the way through the course of your life. That's from a state standpoint, that is the value of that contract.
And what about commitment? Like, what are you really committed to? Are you committed to being a health provider, company? You don't want to be alone, all the scarcity issues, like to support each other. But what about love? Like, that's the claim. Like, I'm in monogamy because I'm in love with you.
Well, right. So when we talk about love, that's the fascinating thing. Love is a very modern concept. And, you know, when it comes to love, I'm not like, I love love, right? Love, that feeling of love. It's, oh my God, but people equate love and then sometimes use drugs to get to that place of love and then think that therefore they're now contractually obligated or they should be contractually obligated, right? And that's kind of the power of cultural mythologies plus some drugs. So there are a lot of people who are like, will take something like, you know, go on an ayahuasca trip or, you know, mushrooms or something, right? And have an experience and feel, oh my God, you're my soulmate, right? And now let's put that in a contract and run that through the system. But really, love is a beautiful experience that, in my experience, is quite infinite. And I think part of unconditioning your mind is saying, like, you know, air, space, the universe, you know, we have everything that is infinite, but love is finite and can only be shared with one person in a very specific way.
And that's the difference between unconditional love and conditioned love.
That's right.
Like if I'm claiming to love you, you know, and it's like a direct energy of like, you're the fulfiller of my love, then what about the old love? Like, so I'm committed to a conditional love instead of committing to love per se.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And the conditioned love is just a love that keeps you in the contract. That's basically what that is. Oh, married people don't do that. Oh, you shouldn't, you know, well, we're in love, so you're not allowed to talk to that person anymore. Right. And so they, you know, it's just it's the thing. That is what most people are calling love, is really just a book of rules and laws that determine what is okay and what's not okay.
So you say the concept of love is fairly modern because in the ancient times they used to marry for other purposes.
Yeah, it was very direct. I mean, you know, you had bloodline, you had stuff. When you started to have stuff, when we started to get into a symbolic culture where I had money and I could use money and exchange it for other things, and now I have stuff, well, you had to ensure that stuff got passed to the right people. Right? And if that didn't happen, then you don't have a culture, you don't have a society. But once you establish, I have stuff and it needs to be passed, like, and then we need some rules and laws around that. So, you know, I have stuff and I die, people don't just randomly go steal my cows, right? That's not okay, because like I did all this work to acquire the cows, so my family should get them. So you start to see how a simple idea, I've got some stuff, a cow, a something of stored value, now I need to be putting a whole bunch of rules and laws and belief systems and religious belief systems and all this intensity. But when you were, you know, when the simplicity of the idea was there, it was obvious we have these contracts to pass genes and stuff, you know, and maybe it's like knighthood or royalty or whatever, but this concern with blood, we are this, we want to, you know, all made up, by the way, but that's the stuff that we still believe in now. But that simplicity back in the day was just, we have this agreement, love is not a thing. Like your family and my family, we're neighbors, we've been fighting all this time, let's get our kids having sex, and now we're family, and now we don't
have to fight.
We don't have to fight. And so that goes, right?
Yeah, and if I die, my kid is going to get my stuff.
Exactly.
My things.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's a valid, you know, it's a valid thing. But when did that happen? Like, in what time frame also, like, sexual monogamy, sexual fidelity came into the piece, you know, because before, you know, it's like you even see the movies or the Tudors or the stories, and basically everybody was like fooling around or fucking around in their marriages. But when did it became as valuable to share stuff, to be like physically in this fidelity that I cannot even Like, you know, in the 50s, 30s, like you were married and you didn't even have the right to have women friends or men friends.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that happens is the controlling of your gene pool, the controlling of the vagina. This is what the world is dealing with all over the world, is, you know, your vulva and vagina. The vulva is like, you know, must be guarded against, and the vagina at all costs. And so the entire globe becomes concerned with that, because, you know, we didn't have paternity tests and we didn't have a way to not be cuckolded or to ensure that. So there just became more and more rules and restrictions. So you couldn't have, oh, you're a single man. I mean, you're a married man and there's a, you know, young fertile woman nearby. This just can't be. So lots of rules and laws. It's not that people weren't doing it, but when it came to fidelity, like, I need to ensure that those are my children, now you get into all the ideas of mental chastity and, you know, all of this stuff where it's like, it's all about controlling the vagina and the eggs, the distribution of eggs, from the female who I, as dad, because you don't know who the dad is. Who knows who the dad is? It could be anybody, right? But because we know that, but mom, you know, like that freaking baby just came out of you, right? So you know who mom is, but dad, you know, nobody's certain about that. You know, now modern day we can do DNA tests and all that stuff, but we didn't have that. So all you could do is create basically the fear of hell and brimstone and fire to protect, to ensure that your children were your children.
But like you say, right now we don't have that anymore.
Right.
We have protection, we have condoms, we have paternity tests, we have different, you know, contraceptive methods. So
that was the turning point.
Yeah, but it's a turning point, but it's not.
Right. So the problem is, okay, great question, right? So how is it that we have all of this science, right? We have incredible scientific breakthroughs. That was the big radical change, by the way, of the 1960s. The radical change that changed everything was birth control. Prior to that, you had some condoms, and, you know, birth control has always been practiced through time. Even the Egyptians had different things that, you know, would be different potions and things that could be inserted into the vagina to kind of kill off sperm and stuff. So we've been aware and concerned about it, but we hadn't perfected it until really the pill became available. And once the pill, which is circa 1960s, once that became available, it radically shifted culture. Because at that moment, we unleashed female sexuality on the world. Because now the vagina was free. It did not need to be controlled, because you could block any passing of genetic material. You just block it, just like I'm on birth control. So now you're freeing up all this sex energy, all this pent up, literally millennia of pent up sex energy starts to get unleashed in the 60s. And it creates a schism in society, a crazy schism, separation, right? Because now we have a divide between the good old days, which is really what you see in our culture now. Like, so everybody's trying to get back, whatever religious belief you have, everybody is trying to get back to the good old days, whatever those were. In kind of Catholic Christian culture, the good old days are the 1950s. You know, it's like,
yeah, make America great again.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's all this like incredible thing. Just let's get back. Let's put the 1960s behind us. Let's put the vaginas back in the bottle and just get everybody just being all, you know, God-fearing and, you know, together. Right. And then, and, one man, one woman, all this stuff is all like, let's just get back to the 50s. There are other cultures where there are other religions where they're trying to get back to the medieval times. There are other, everybody's trying to get back to essentially the quote unquote, the good old days, but there is no such thing, right? That's gone. There's no place to get back to because the planet has changed. So what hasn't changed is the beliefs about all this. We don't have stories for empowered female sexuality. We don't have them, because an empowered sexual female is a whore or a slut if she crosses whatever the cultural boundary is. So you're either a good girl and everything's buttoned up and your vagina's buttoned up, or you're somewhere in between, kind of putting your little paw out and maybe doing a little naughty thing.
But still you feel guilty and ashamed.
Exactly.
So you really don't enjoy it. Right.
And this is what we're dealing with. This programming runs so deep that I'm now looking at young people and I'm like, what are they going, like, how do they move ahead in this culture? On one hand, everybody has, their own porn sites now, right? The one thing Corona did is OnlyFans and all these things, like women can now make money doing their own, hey, I've got this thing, I've got that thing, private sites, I can make I think it's beautiful. But that on one hand, that's fine. But not if you want to get married and do these things and have a career and be taken seriously and all this stuff. And so we're in this paradox: be sexual, be overt and sexual, but not too sexual. Right? I.e., show your feet, but not your vagina. Whatever the thing is, right? It doesn't matter, but it's hilarious. So now you've got like TikToks. Girls, just sexy, way over the top sexy, and no mythologies for them to step into. So on one hand, oh yeah, be empowered. On the other hand, oh my God, that's disgusting. How could you do that? And this is because we have not created the new mythologies for female sexuality that allows a woman to be open and empowered and saying yes or no to her vagina. Instead, we just need a whole bunch of other people to make those decisions, because obviously women can't make those decisions because the 1950s. You know what I mean? It's all like circles around the same thing. So we're now in a place where the mythologies are thousands of years old. The stories for what is okay and what's not okay. But the realities of the world have changed. And we are right in the middle of whatever the coronavirus did for relationships, for monogamy or non-monogamy, alternatives, self-discovery, all that stuff. We're not going to know the outcome of this for probably between 5 to 20 years from now.
Yeah, and I think that's why for me having this conversation with you, it's so important, because it's like you say, there's no frame to step into.
Y ya está a la venta nuestro libro El futuro del sexo, que es la culminación de 7 años de trabajo y de co-creación con mi maestro Lawrence Lanoff, en el cual creamos esta metodología que le podríamos sinceramente llamar es la esencial y definitiva para vivir tu sexualidad de una forma holística y de una forma transformadora. Cuando hablamos de la sexualidad, automáticamente pensamos que es algo genital. Que sea genitalizado, creemos que simplemente es acerca del placer sexual. Pero la verdadera sexualidad, el verdadero poder y potencial que tenemos como seres humanos es acerca de abrazar esta conciencia erótica, esta energía orgásmica y llevar la sexualidad más allá de lo genital, sino crear esta conexión, crear esta sensación multiorgásmica para vivir momentos de transformación, momentos de meditación profunda, de creatividad, de sanación. Así que los invito a que vayan hoy a Amazon, a Apple Store y que descarguen este libro que va a transformar no solo su vida sexual, sino sus vidas.
So I want to go to the practical questions
Yeah, of course.
because of all the people, all of you that have written to me and asked about this topic. So first of all, you're married, right? And then you, because times have changed, you're like, oh my God, I just made a contract to be sexually with this person for the
Forever.
rest of my life. And of course, you know, we have changed. So of course I start thinking and feeling and fantasizing with other men or other women.
Yep.
And there's a lot of guilt and shame around that.
Yep.
The other scenario is like, I'm happily married, sex is great, but then I got pregnant and the guy doesn't want to have sex with me anymore.
Totally.
And the other thing that I've seen happening, it's like, I love my partnership with this person, but I'm not really attracted and I'm not really into sex.
Right.
So
That's it. You basically have all the bases covered.
Yeah,
there.
but what happens in those scenarios? Like, what's a new reference point? Do we need to communicate? Do we need to open your relationship in that case, or how can we create this new frame, this new possibility?
Well, one frame that I use, which is core to what I'm teaching ultimately, and what we have spoken about multiple times, right? The frame will come down to, am I an adult and can I trust myself to be an adult? And is the human that I am interacting with, am I willing to treat them like an adult, which they are, and interact with them as a responsible adult? And that one frame, which is an adult framework, in other words,
Which is becoming responsible and acknowledging.
yes,
Which a lot of people don't do.
that's it, right? So part of the belief systems are to, it seems to me, the best way I could describe it, because I recently met a 35-year-old virgin woman.
Wow.
And I was like, so how does this happen? Right? How does this happen? So this is like, the parents have a strong belief system. They're like, you got to save yourself for the one. And then you spend all your life looking for the one. And then you know, and so she didn't find the one. And so she just kept waiting because all of her value is tied up with this vaginal canal. In a nutshell, right? That's it. And if that gets rocked in any way, the whole thing falls apart. And that is the great conceit that we're all playing with. So what was so fascinating about her, and where I was going with this, is talking to her sexually. I'm talking to a child, because the purpose of these belief systems is to create a childlike, non-experienced, not based in reality belief system.
So it's part of the maturity. So if you come back for how come there's so much immaturity in the world, and then you're like hanging out with 60-year-olds who look like 18-year-olds, and you're hanging out with like 33-year-old amazing men, but emotionally they're in the 18. It's because also sexuality and your connection with your sexuality like lifts you to the maturity you're supposed to have according to your age. Experience. And life experience, sex, energy is life experience.
Yes. That is key. And because we don't have discussions about reality, right? The reality of desire, the reality of like,
Yeah, we'll keep it in the fantasy.
right. We keep it in the fantasy, and we keep it in the realm of I should or you should.
Where this is the right thing to do.
This is the right way, right? That's the power of the belief system. So by staying in that realm and not dealing with reality, everybody thinks they're messed up, which is great for religion and social structure. Because as long as everybody's fucked up about who they are at their core, their desires, and they think there's something wrong with them, then people are very easy they're very pliable because everybody's guilty and ashamed for their desires, and they stay childlike. Oh, well, you shouldn't have that. You should confess, or whatever the thing is, whatever the belief system is. So they never grow up because they're never forced to deal with A, their desires, B, reality, C, openly communicate, D, be who you are. None of that is acceptable. It's like, don't be who you are, hide that, tell the big lie in a monogamous fashion, and just make it to the finish line, and then you'll get your rewards in heaven. Is kind of the way we've been doing it. So every example you told me is just basically an example of the mythology, the immature mythology, telling you how to behave and what is right and what is wrong.
And being judged for your desires or what you want.
That's right.
Because and in a way, it's interesting because I had an experience once with a lover friend, and he was jealous. But he was even jealous because he's like, are you afraid of commitment that you just don't want to be like faithful to me sexually? And it was like, it's not really about that. It's about trusting I am an adult and I have needs and I have my private space, but I am committed to you. It's like in business partnership. I'm committed with you, Lawrence, in our project, in the future of sex, your orgasmic method. But that doesn't mean I'm committed to other people in other businesses. It's kind of like I see it so simply, but there's like so much insecurity around that. I think it comes from the immaturity of like, you don't love me enough. You're going to leave me for another person. So I think also we're not clear on why did I choose to be with this person.
Right.
So how can we start like creating this frame that starts with trust? I know you don't use that language because
trust is very important.
Yeah, but building that trust of like, I'm with an adult, not a child. I have to ask, what's in your pants? What did you do yesterday? You were with your girlfriends. How come you didn't call me?
Yeah.
You were probably flirting, and like all this jealousy and territorial possessiveness comes out, which is like a child.
That's
scared.
That's it, right? That's the training, the programming, the conditioning, the traumas of our, and that keeps us in an immature state. So the first step is to here's the idea. If the world is fucked up and everybody is fucked up, because it seems like everybody's in therapy and everybody's having relationship issues.
Which is great for us.
Great, yes. If that is the case, then maybe the problem isn't people. The problem is the unrealistic ideals and ideas and expectations. Because if everybody's doing the thing that you're told you shouldn't do, maybe the problem is the thing you're told, oh, well, you shouldn't do that. Who says? But if we strip that away and we say, okay, I'm an adult, there is nobody who is listening to this right now who is only inhaling. You are inhaling and you are exhaling. Because we are a two-part system and we need both. Nobody's arguing, and there are no laws on the book, and there's no religious scripture that says you should only inhale because it isn't a thing. The only place where there are rules and laws is we have an idea that it shouldn't be the way it is, or we don't want it to be that way. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be inhaling and exhaling.
And we tend to polarize things, you know. It's like when we talk about open relationships, automatically the thought forms that come to us, it's like, he's gonna be there out there having like 20 lovers and having sex constantly and in orgies, and you're gonna be here and it's gonna be all crazy, and you imagine yourself like in this Greek orgy party, like on drugs, like fucking whoever walks in the way. And it's really not about that. Yeah. Because also I think the new frame of relationships, it's like you become discerning or on who you're sharing your time with. For sure. Because you don't want the drama of those archaic stories and beliefs.
That's it. Right. So again, coming back to that adult framework. Right. So there are people who, I mean, orgies exist because humans like to have orgies. And so, you know, it's, you know, group sex exists because people like to do it. It's just we in a culture don't really have a way to handle that. And also, we like to pair bond, right? We like to be together. We like to Netflix and chill. But when you're doing that over time, that sexual intensity, which you could think of as, you know, like the passion. The passion is going to, it's a natural thing that your brain and central nervous system does. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong. So the people who've been married...
It's the cycle.
It's the cycle, right? The people who've been married for 20 years and they think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? We got to get the fire back. There's no there there. It's like trying to go back to the 1950s. You know, that rush of dopamine that you have when you first, quote unquote, fall in love with somebody, that's what humans need to put up with the rest of the bullshit that comes down the road, right? You got to have that strong, you got to not see all the red flags. You just got to be, I love this person no matter what. And the way we do that is just flood ourselves with dopamine. And literally in the beginning of a relationship, when you're in love, there is not one thing a person can do.
So when the dopamine goes out, then you're like, hi, Karina, guess what? I have a problem. What's your problem? I've been married for 20 years and I just don't feel that passion.
Right.
And it's not a problem. It's just what it is.
It
in
is what
in
it
a
is.
physiological perspective,
Right.
even.
And think of all the people that throw away perfectly good relationships
Because of that.
Yeah. Right? You've developed this whole intimacy and connection and trust and all these beautiful things, but you don't have the dopamine because dopamine and all of that depth don't go. They're two different systems.
Yeah, and that's one of my questions because I know this couple, they were married for 20 years.
Yeah.
They had an amazing marriage. Mm-hmm. Just sex wasn't that often, and he kind of wanted to try something else. She wanted to try something else. That was an issue, and they got divorced, and they threw all the marriage away because they had a little fling, or they had another fantasy,
right.
Or they talked about the possibility of like going there and exploring there together, and that didn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tragic because part of the new paradigm has to be understanding the physics of being a human being. That we need curiosity, excitement, dopamine, and we also need nurturing love and intimacy. And both of those things must be present for psychological health and well-being. Which means when the dopamine leaves the relationship, which is anywhere from 3 months to, I think the outside of dopamine is like 3.5 years or something, that you have ways, rational ways, and fun ways to have dopamine. In other words, that could be, as a friend likes to say, some strange, right? Go have a random thing. You're not going to why would you throw away all of not only the contractual obligations, but everything that you've done, built together and all that stuff, because somebody wants to put point A inside of slot B for an hour? It just doesn't make sense, right? But that's the problem with a 6,000-year-old mythology. It's not updated to reality. The reality is you don't call your husband because you went to the dentist and the dentist stuck his fingers in your wet hole that we call your mouth. Nobody has a problem with that. You go to the dentist, people are sticking in your wet hole all the time. But then you spoke to somebody and the other wet hole was touched, and now we've got to get a divorce.
Or even you feel that flirty energy.
Right. And now we got to get a divorce.
Yeah.
It's great. It's so...
last century.
It's so last century, right? So we I don't know what's right. It's not for us to decide.
Of course.
But we need to update our stories because the kids, young people, are so lost. They're so like up, down. What does it mean? And it's like, well, what it means is we need some updates. One of the updates is adult framework. Start treating people in your life like they're adults and they can handle things, and that you're an adult and you can handle things. That one shift can change everything, because then you start to say, well, if I just treat my partner like they're an adult and they can handle things, then we can start to have some far more interesting conversations. Right? We can start talking about...
Yeah, instead of the 18-year-old conversations, right?
Right. That's key. So those conversations, you either have them or you don't. If you have them, you may figure out that it makes sense to not be with the person you're with. Mm-hmm. Right? Because, for example, a partner says, oh my God, I realize, whatever. Well, cool. They're free. They're an adult. Mm-hmm. You had the difficult conversation. Now you can also not have those conversations, and the outcome will ultimately be the same. Or, which you see with people, many people, like just going to the grave, just being like, well, as one, client that I work with, her husband says, well, I bought the boat. That's it. Got to carry my cross forever. And they're miserable. And they abuse each other. And it's like, it's time to update our mythologies, right? It's time to start to update the stories. Can we create a way for a woman to be empowered in her sexuality and open and adult-like in her sexuality, and have discussions without that threatening her entire career? Because people have opinions about what she is doing with her body, right? So we have a long way to go, but we do need to start shifting our stories. Can we come up with some stories where we're connecting as adults?
And when we feel empowered, which empowering is also honoring your desires.
Yes, it's essential, right? For us, we know this is why I love working with people around this, because your desires, that is the spiritual path. Your desires will tell you so much about who you are and what you want. And some of those desires are going to be amazing things, and some of them you can experience, and some you will never be able to experience, because maybe I want to have sex on Mars or Venus.
Maybe.
Yeah. But,
maybe in your mind.
In my mind, I can do all of
exactly.
it.
And also allow yourself to go there.
That's right. And that's the difference, giving ourselves room to have our desires and our fantasies. Because love, you can see as an infinite thing. And if I begin to think of love in an infinite perspective, then me having a desire just continues to expand the pot of love. Right? So that gives us a chance, coming back to the beginning of this podcast, where we can be ourselves, right? Where you can find out who you really are and share that with the world, including the stuff all of it, right? Including the stuff you're ashamed about or afraid of, and be around people that want to be around, that accept you as you are. Like if we just had that one little framework.
Yeah, everything would be so different.
So different.
So I have 3 questions.
Yes.
Okay. One question talking about updating our beliefs. So also right now with sexual freedom, you know, we talk about woman empowerment and just being sexually free, or even just acknowledging that we're sexy and we're flirty and that it's okay, nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
But with all this new spiritual, let's say, trends, because it's a trend.
Yeah, for sure.
I had like a lot of women who come to me really worried about
the energy,
being free in their sexuality, because, and actually this happened last weekend. I was with this woman and she was like, oh, I haven't had sex in 3 years. And I was like, why is that? Is it something you don't desire? Because if it's a choice, it's perfect.
For sure.
And she's like, no, it's not that. It's just that somebody told me that if I have sex with a man,
you get the energy
for
forever.
7 years.
Yeah, well, that's an updated, because it used to be forever.
Yeah. So I asked her, but who said that?
Yeah.
I don't know, but where did you read it? I don't know, but who said that? Like, who invented that? Who proved that? Who was in charge? And I think a lot of women are starting also to become repressed, because I want to be very conscious, I want to be very spiritual.
Yep.
But if we see sexuality is also an expression of our spirit, it's what we look in spirituality, we talk more about in the future of sex. Like, what could you say to that? Like, you being the master of energy,
I have 3 things to say.
Yeah, but you told me that personally, and that shifted.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to basically what you're describing is another crappy mythology or story to control a woman's vagina. So what happened is remember, we've already talked in this pod, the purpose of all of these things is to control the opening. But, people are growing and they're changing, and I found this yoga path and I found this and I found that. And so now I'm starting to be, be empowered, but don't be too empowered. Be empowered, but if you have sex with this man, his energy will be with you for 7 years.
And not for him, just for
women.
women.
Yeah, just for
men,
you.
that's not the story.
For men, is not the story. Right. So now you have these women being paranoid. It's a different version of the number. And the number is actually 3. Which is, there was a lot of research done in Great Britain that the perfect number for a woman to have of partners is 3 before she gets married. And
I was like 3 at the same time. That sounds good.
Right. Of course it sounds good, because 3 is amazing. In this case, it's for her history. She's not considered damaged goods in Great Britain.
Till what? Till
number 4. No, like currently. Like this is current.
Okay.
This is
yeah, because in the state, I think it's less than 20. Like, it goes a little higher. I mean, I saw that in a movie.
Yeah,
she had her little black book.
Yeah, but that's it's less than 20, but she would never say that out loud.
Yeah, of course.
Right. In her mind is less than 20, and probably 15 of those can be explained off as, oh, I was drunk or I wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. Because the number's actually not that much more.
So 3 or 4.
Yeah, 3
in
or
Great
4,
Britain.
and probably in America on the outside, 7,
Yeah.
6, right?
Yeah.
Because you start to get much more than that, and now everybody, oh my God, gee, right? For 100 different reasons. So again, an outdated mythology.
So it'll take you 42 years to clear that energy.
That's right. That's right. 42 years, not counting the ones that you quote unquote don't remember. So you realize that there's an absurdity to this, right? And the absurdity is you have to come to this. So number one is, it's a story. So seek to disprove that story. Are there times when you have eaten some food and the quote unquote energy of that food stayed with you and then it was gone, right? It's a wet hole you put something into, and like the only thing that keeps an energy in place is your belief about it. So now that's not to say I have not done some sessions with people, and you have done them too, where we have cleared energy, but typically I experience that as like a bunch of belief and guilt and shame that's all holding that like glue, and that needs to be cleared.
Yeah, it's not the act of sex, but are the beliefs and emotions around that interaction.
That's right. Which ends up feeling like to the body like a trauma. And trauma needs to be cleared and healed. And that's one of the things. So the first thing is that. The second thing is I really encourage women to develop energetic mastery. There's all kinds of classes they can take with you, classes we can do with your orgasmic, courses, stuff, right? Because the more masterful you are about thinking about energy, the less you are bound by limiting beliefs about energy.
Because you experience that.
That's right.
That's easy as that.
It's as easy as that.
That's incredible. You heard it, ladies. You heard it. So we have like 2 minutes,
Yes.
Lawrence, just to finish up. So if I want to start to relate in this openness, that's what open relationship is. It's the openness of I'm having a relationship and committed to another adult in many different ways.
That's right.
Loyalty is friendship, committed to the love, committed to our vision. But what if I want to open that conversation? 1, if I'm in partnership, and 2, if I'm a single person, how can I open that conversation with somebody I'm dating?
Right. So number 1, I'm going to start with your last question first. Go full on right from the beginning. If you want to try being in an open relationship, communicate about that immediately. There is no point in pretending and then having that discussion 3-4 weeks or months down the line. Lay that on the table right in the beginning, because what you're looking for is people who are open to the idea and open to have the discussion. So if somebody goes like, oh my God, I could never do that, you just saved yourself 6 months of emotional paperwork.
But what if you say yes, and then you start experiencing, and then there's so many emotions that come up and you don't know how to handle it because you're maturing emotionally. You're tuning into that, and then it's a disaster.
Well, you want to get support.
Okay.
Right? You don't want to just do these things based on a podcast, right? There are people like you and me, and there are ways to begin to think about this, but you want to be talking the entire time. So if I say I want to be open, and we have an experience of open, and then there's a lot of emotions that come up, that's normal. That's normal. You communicate about it.
Yeah, we're shifting the frame.
Exactly.
It's like when you work out your biceps and you never worked out, before, and you're like crying.
That's right. It takes time.
It's a muscle.
And we want to be gentle with that. Right? And that applies in a partnership. If I'm already in a partnership and I want to start having a realistic discussion, hey, we've been together 20 years. I think it's time for us to bring some dopamine into this and allow the energy of the dopamine to expand the love in our relationship. That's possible. It is possible, and it is beautiful. And anybody listening to this, there are more, we got resources, just realizing that so much of what you believe about sex has been programming, and just being open and curious to where things can go for you as a sexual human, as a sexual creature. When you start to think about that and be open and curious, that's when things start to get exciting. Being curious about your desires, your partner's desires, your potential partner's desires, being open, vulnerable, communicating, curious.
That's a journey.
That is the journey.
Amazing, Lawrence. And to all of you who are very interested about this, we have the Blue Relationship Blueprint, the online course in yourgasmic.com in English, so you can have it there. It's a great resource. We have our book, The Future of Sex, where we talk a lot about energetic intimacy, boundaries, communication, so you have that resource. There's blogs from Lawrence about this topic in yourgasmic.com, so there's no way to be informed, and get support if you're willing to step into your full adultship.
Yes, that is it. That's beautiful.
Oh, this was so much fun.
It was so much fun. Thank
know.
You so much.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
So beautiful. Always beautiful. And this is, it's just great to just see where you have just watch your evolution and my evolution. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so grateful for all the 7 years I trained with the energy with you. I learned so much, and now co-creating and just be really on the spot checking your Orgasmic in our Instagram, because we're going to do several retreats and workshops in the coming year. So thank you, Lorenzo.
Gracias.
Gracias a ti y a todos ustedes. Hasta la próxima.
Muchos de ustedes me han preguntado acerca de cómo nutrirnos, sobre todo si estamos pasando como mujeres por momentos hormonales, queremos más balance en nuestra sexualidad, queremos tener una vida mucho más amorosa con nosotras mismas. Y es por esto que escribí el libro del punto A al punto G, que habla de la nutrición integral y de balancear nuestra comida primaria, que digamos que son nuestras relaciones humanas, que a veces son muy complicadas, pero que todos estos temas de desequilibrio anímico pueden provocar depresión, sufrimiento, pueden afectar incluso nuestro peso y nuestra expresión corporal. Y es por eso que encontrar esta armonía, nutriéndonos tanto en el corazón, en nuestra sexualidad y en la alimentación, pueden crear esta plenitud. Si estás lista para liberarte y experimentar el amor y el sexo a su máxima expresión, ve ahora a tu tienda, a tu librería o online y compra del punto A al punto G.